Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, hello, whatever time of day you're watching this, I hope you're really well. So in this video today, I really thought it was important to talk about what actually sustainability is, what it means to live sustainably, because that's something that I'm promoting on my channel, it's something I'm talking about a lot, and I would like to preface this video by saying that I wouldn't consider myself an expert. Sustainability and the environment and all that kind of stuff is something that I am on a journey learning about. It's something that in my professional life I am learning about, and I've done some professional courses and I'm developing a career in this area. But I'm new to this field and I would not call myself an expert. So what I'm sharing today is some of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years and some of my own opinions about how things are. So take it as you will. I just wanted to say that before I get started. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump straight into the topic of the video today. So let's start off with very simply, very plain, what is sustainability? Banging on about sustainable living, what actually does it mean? So very simply, for something to be sustainable, you must not be using more resources than can be reproduced or remade, regrown, whatever it is. So you have to, in a period of time, the amount that you're using has to then be replenished for a system to be sustainable. So it's probably quite obvious how that relates to the environment, that we are using resources for things like fossil fuels, trees, whatever it is, all this stuff, we're using these resources, and the issue comes in when we're using more resources than the planet can provide us with. And there's a second aspect, I think, something that's really open to me more now that I've been thinking about living sustainably, and that is living mentally sustainably. So in terms of the life you're living, it's not just what you're using, but it's the kind of life that you're living. Basically taking care of yourself, making sure that you're replenishing your resources whilst living life and doing what you need to do. And I mention that because I do think the two are very closely intertwined. So we've got the environment and we've got our personal lives and how we spend our time. And those two things I do believe very closely related, which I will get into just a little bit later on in the video. So in terms of the environment, and in terms of the way that we're living our lives, currently it's not sustainable for the planet, and that's how we've found ourselves facing a climate crisis. So the accepted definition for sustainability, sustainable development, is that we are meeting the needs of the current generation whilst not taking away the ability of future generations to also meet their basic needs. So we have to be meeting our own needs, the needs of all the people on the planet, which we are not doing. Spoiler, we are not doing that. And we have to be able to make sure that future generations can meet their own needs. Spoiler again, we are not doing that. That is not how we are living, and that there is where the problem lies. So why is this happening? Why is this a problem? How have we got into this state of using too many resources? Well, I think it's really interesting to think about population levels. So we are kind of starting to slow down. The kind of rise of population is slowing down, but it took all of the time for humans on Earth up until the year 1800 to reach a population level of 1 billion people. So all of those years, millions of years of evolution, it took up to 1800, so that's 222 years ago, up to 1800 to reach 1 billion people. And then it took 130 years, so through the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, 130 years for that to double to 2 billion people. And then it took just 29 years for that to then get to 3 billion people. And now here we are just 222 years later at a population of over 7 billion people on the planet. So you can kind of see we've grown sevenfold in just 222 years, which, when you think about it, it's not that many generations, and it's not that far back in history that there were just 1 billion people on the planet. And of course, along with the Industrial Revolution, the reason that our population has been able to grow is the advances in technology and the fact that we've had access to resources and burning fossil fuels, and meaning that people could have more children, they could have an easier life, their children were more likely to survive, certainly as medicine developed. So more people have survived, people have had more children, they've had an easier life, they've been able to live longer as well. And as technology and medicine has improved, the profits have grown and access to money has grown. So it just means that we're living much more safe and convenient lives than we were. And all of these billions of people are using so much more resources than were being used by the 1 billion people in 1800. So of course this is a very broad overstatement about how the populations have grown, because different countries, different continents have access to different resources and have developed financially, economically, have developed at different rates. So in more economically developed countries such as the UK and US, we are using per person far more resource than someone in, say, Africa, where there is so much more poverty, so many more of the people do not have access to the resources that we would all have access to here in the West. And the interesting thing about that is that the more economically developed countries such as ourselves, we are continuing to grow. It's always looking at growth, financial and economic growth. And we are growing and growing, and it keeps going up, even with things like the last couple of years where we've taken some hits economically. The focus is always on economic growth. And that is the same in these lesser economically developed countries. So it's not, of course, that they're not economically developed whatsoever. They are lesser economically developed than countries such as our own, but they are continuing to develop and grow as we are at different points in the process, but they are growing and people are being lifted out of poverty. Organisations such as the UN and charities and so many people work so hard to bring lesser economically developed countries, to help them access resources, to help them have a better way of life, as they should. And of course that just means more resources are being used. So the global middle class is growing because these lesser economically developed countries are developing. There's more people that have access to money and to more resources. They want to, we all want to live these more convenient lives. We want access to education. We want to better ourselves. And we want access to things like technology and all of this kind of stuff, which is very resource intensive. Every family wants their own car, for example. And these are all things that are really resource intensive. And as the population grows, the middle class sector using these resources grows even more. It's just referred to as the global middle class of people climbing out of poverty. It doesn't mean that rich people are using less resources than the middle class, for example. They're obviously using a lot more, as you see billionaires flying into space. Anyway, so a really helpful way of looking at how much we are using is Earth Overshoot Day. Earth Overshoot Day lays out the exact date that the world, and broken down by country, are using up all of the resources that could conceivably be replenished in 1 year. So for the Earth in 2021, that date was July 29th. Averaging out how many resources every person in the world is using, or figuring that out, we have used all of the resources that could be replenished in 1 year by July 29th, which is frightening. So, you're getting to almost halfway through the year. We are burning into our reserves, burning into our savings, as you might call it, after the end of July. And you can break that down further. So if every person on the planet, all 7.3 billion people, I think it's 7.3 billion people, were using the same resources as the average person in the UK, that date would be May the 19th. And if you average every person in the UK was using the same resources as an average American, that date is March the 13th for 2021. So only less than a quarter of the way into the year, all of the resources in the planet would be used up, and you're burning into the reserves for the rest of the year if everyone behaved the same as the average American. That's a really scary thought. We're using so many resources, and that is clearly not sustainable. It is not sustainable at all. It goes against all of the definitions of what being sustainable would mean. And that is why we are now facing a very real and very frightening climate crisis, because we are burning through all of the fossil fuels. And these fossil fuels are things that have been underground for millions and millions of years. So taking things like coal and oil, for example, they have been underground for millions of years, and all of these fossil fuels are holding so much carbon. So they're holding carbon, and as we take them out of the ground and burn these fossil fuels, they are releasing carbon. Just very, very simply, they are releasing carbon into the atmosphere, and the amount of carbon in the atmosphere affects everything. It affects the water cycle, and it's more than just carbon, but just carbon equivalent. I'll link to a more educational video about it, because I'm just very briefly just saying that we are releasing carbon into the planet, and we are not taking carbon back into the planet because we are destroying so much more than we are replenishing. So very simply, very basically, that is why we are facing a climate crisis. We are using more than we can replenish. So if that's the case, frightening, what can we do about it? What do we need to do about it? We need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of everyone on the planet. Their basic human needs are being met, whilst we are not taking away the ability of future generations to also meet their basic needs. And currently this feels like an almost impossible task. It's big. It's a big change in the world that needs to happen. And for every society, there are really three pillars which need to be taken into consideration. And this is the pillar of profit, people, and the planet. So these three factors need to be taken into consideration in equal amount. And unfortunately, currently, profit takes priority. And I think especially as we have seen in the last couple of years with how governments have put the economy over the health and well-being of people and over the environment, it really makes it apparent that profit is number one and people and planet are crushed underneath and profit is built on top. And that has to change. It has to change, because otherwise there isn't going to be a planet to live on, and none of this is going to be able to continue. There isn't going to be food, there isn't going to be clean, fresh drinking water. There isn't going to be the opportunity for this economy. The economies are going to crumble because we are abusing the very things that our societies, that everything that we know and understand is built upon. So I think a really fantastic theory is Kate Raworth's donut economics, theory of donut economics. And I will link a video below. It's really, really worth a watch, where she does a TED talk and explains it all. And there are cities around the world that are starting to take her theory, donut theory, they're building their economies on this donut theory.
Kate Raworth, in her donut model, is addressing both the social problems that we're facing in this world, as well as the ecological problems, and puts them together in a model where we can address both, where we can look at how we make sure that nobody is deprived of the basic needs, social basic needs, and income, housing, etc. But it's also looking at how do we make sure that we don't pollute the world, that we don't use more materials than we have to, so that we keep within our planetary boundaries. And this is exactly what Amsterdam wants to do, because we want to look at the social impact of climate crisis as well as the ecological impact. And not only what is happening here in Amsterdam and how we can make sure that the social foundations of our city are well being kept and we don't overuse our planetary boundaries, but also in other parts of the world. And therefore we have to look at the way we produce and the way we consume.
So it's incredible, and I truly believe that we could live in a world like this in the future. So what she what she has put together is this donut, and the center of the donut, the middle kind of where you'd put the chocolate filling, I guess, well, not quite, but that is the safe and just space for humanity to live. So that is the sweet spot where we want to live, in that safe and just space for humanity. And in the center of the donut, you have the social foundations. So this is making sure that everyone's needs are being met. Everyone has access to healthcare. Everyone has a roof over their heads. Everyone has access to jobs, to opportunities. They can eat a meal. They're not starving. They can access water. All of these social foundations are being met, which currently they are not. As I mentioned earlier, they are not. And then the outside of the donut is all of the environmental barriers. So she's called it the environmental ceiling. And these are things like biodiversity loss, chemical pollution, climate change, ocean acidification, ozone depletion, all of these things that we need to make sure we are not using too much of. We are not destroying biodiversity. We are not causing ocean acidification. We are not changing the climate, more than it naturally would be. And of course, we are bursting through all of those ceilings. So currently in the situation, this lovely, idyllic, safe and just space for humanity, we are nowhere near that. We are crashing through the foundations, the social foundations, and we are bursting through the environmental ceiling. And that is just simply because profit is being considered more important than people and planet. So there are, in terms of what actually needs to happen to get there, there are two things. There needs to be a general understanding within the population and a general support for the fact that we are facing a climate crisis, the needs of people are not being met, and things need to change. And the second thing, most importantly, but I think a catalyst for this is the population's changing understanding, is that governments have to change how things are set up. It has to be changed, it has to be different. So as an example, the city of Amsterdam are actually working by this theory of donut economics, and they are making sure, they are working hard to make sure that they are doing what they can to reduce the environmental damage that they cause, and they are doing what they can to look after people that need support. And this doesn't just mean people within their city, this means people around the world. So much of what we have, what is made, is shipped from other countries because it is so much cheaper for a factory worker in a country where the minimum wage is so much lower, or where they can more easily get away with slave labour. It's so much easier, so much cheaper to do that and then sell cheap to us consumers. And so the city of Amsterdam is working to make sure that the things that they have, the resources that they use, are not at the cost of anyone around the world and anywhere in the planet. And that is how things need to change. Things have to change, and we need to be open to change, and we need to be open to understanding that things will change, because otherwise there isn't going to be a planet in the future. We're already looking at soil depletion to such a degree, or healthy soil depletion to such a degree, that in the UK we won't be able to grow food in 30 years' time. And 30 years is actually a longer estimate, because looking at how the weather changes, there's potential for crop destruction well before that 30-year mark. And that's going to be, you know, I'm maybe coming up to my retirement age and I'm not going to have access to food, or I might not have access to clean drinking water. And this is in a more economically developed country. That's not even taking into account the countries that are going to be under the water already in such a short amount of time. So it's really vital. We really have to, at least at a minimum, have this understanding of how things need to change, to be open to change, to be open to governments making changes, voting for governments that are in support and have an understanding of what needs to happen. So just some really simple examples of how the choices that we make as consumers, the votes that we make with the money that we spend, impact the planet. I would say a really big one is clothing. So in particular, fast fashion, but a lot of clothing, basically. Clothing that isn't made by a company whose core values are putting the planet and people ahead of their own profits. If it's not a company doing that, if it's, for example, H&M using recycled materials, it is still destructive to the planet, because it is still feeding into a system where we keep on consuming, we keep on buying, and we keep on using resources when we don't need to keep on using those resources. We can use what we have, we can mend what we have. There are so many clothes in the world, we probably don't even need to make any new clothes, you know, within reason. So what is the problem with clothes? It is that these brands are using slave labour. They are paying people absolute pittance that they can barely live on. So they are building their profits on the people, at the expense of people, and the poor treatment of people. And they are polluting, so they are using huge amounts of resources. So a pair of jeans takes something like 200 litres of water to make. That is a huge amount of resource. And then the dyeing process, it's leaching into rivers, is causing pollution, and a lot of the time this pollution is in areas where poor people are actually living, and it's again impacting their lives, their opportunities, and their health. So all these companies, places like basically any shop that's on the high street, so whether it's Boohoo, whether it's ASOS, whether it's New Look, Zara, H&M, wherever it is, even if they have these green credentials, a lot of it unfortunately is greenwashing, and they are still continuing to use resources. Even if it's recycled material, it's being sewn together by people being paid like 50 cents for 4 hours or whatever it is. So their profits are being built on top of, you know, crushing down the planet and people. And another one is food, so specifically animal agriculture and animal farming. So I find this to be a very difficult topic, more difficult than any other, because people feel very strongly that they have a right to eat whatever they like to eat. And unfortunately that comes at the expense of the planet, of people and animals as well, of course. So in terms of the planet, animal agriculture contributes to about 1/4 of all global warming. They're using huge amounts of water to raise animals, using huge amounts of land space for animal feed. So in terms of like eating a piece of tofu or something, people say, well, they're cutting down the Amazon rainforest for soybeans, for tofu. It's like, no, 99% of that, or 90% of that is being used as animal feed, including for animals in the UK. So we are losing biodiversity, they're using resources like water, and these animals are releasing methane into the planet and causing climate change. And then you have the people. So when you think about slaughterhouse workers, the nightmarish conditions that they're working in, how poorly affected they are by the type of job that they often have to have. There's not many people that are in a position where they want to be a slaughterhouse worker. It's often people in desperate need of a job that don't have any other opportunities. So you have the mental impact of working in a slaughterhouse. Often there's research that has found that there are increased cases of domestic violence in people that work in slaughterhouses, because they are going through, you can't deny that working in a slaughterhouse is a traumatic experience, because you're not someone that's on a farm with a single animal that you've taken care of. You are going through line after line of animal and just slitting throats, and it's not okay. It's not an okay way for animals to be treated, and it's not an okay way for humans to spend their days in and out working in a slaughterhouse. And then you have the pollution. So pig farms in particular, they cause a lot of runoff. There's a lot of feces, and that's running into the rivers, and that is polluting the rivers and local areas. And often people living near a slaughterhouse are in less economic areas, and it's again another crime against people, basically. So there are just two quite quick examples about how profit is put on top of people and planet. And those two things are basically not considered, while profit is what's most important. In my opinion, sustainable living isn't just linked to buying less plastic bottles, taking your reusable bottle. It's not as simple as that. There are so many different aspects. And I think that it has to encompass compassion, it has to encompass thoughtfulness, and it really needs to encompass a slower way of living, a more thoughtful way of living. Because we want to be making choices that support us all moving into that safe and just space for humanity. And I think the way that current economics and measures of success are that people are comparing themselves to others. We believe that working hard, grinding, and earning more money is what is most important, when in actual fact, how you spend your time, having time to make choices and to live the life that you want, is, in my opinion, more important than being a millionaire, for example. And we're living in a place where having a private jet, for example, living in a mansion, whatever it is, whatever these kind of, owning a Lamborghini, whatever it is, that is seen as, wow, that person is successful. That person has money, so they are a success in life. And that is seen to be greater than something like having a happy marriage, or having freedom to do with your time the things that you enjoy. Like, we're living our life once. Why put 30 years into grinding, working 15 hours a day, trying to become a millionaire, when you could be living a life where you are spending your time doing things that are important to you? Of course, I understand that there are so many people around the world that are working 15 hours a day because they're trying to survive. And that is not at all what I'm talking about. In this specific moment, I'm talking about people that are in this middle class and have the space and opportunities to make decisions like this. So working tirelessly, becoming rich, owning a huge house, a private jet, whatever it is sucking resources, becoming a billionaire and flying to space. Like, the richer you're getting, the more of the planet's resources you're using and the less sustainable of a life you're living. And I really feel it's important for a change in mindset, that even simple things like you can wear the same outfit over and over again. There's still, with social media, there's so much pressure to always be buying new clothes, be wearing new outfits, be fashionable, where that doesn't need to be important at all. Things like having friendship in your life, feeling content with the things that you do have, that you're lucky enough to own, having safety. Like, for so many people, just having a safe home isn't something that they have. But when it comes to it, having a safe home and feeling loved is really, to me, that is like the height of success. And it may sound crazy. In terms of my work, I want to feel that I am doing something positive to make a positive impact in the world. I'm not earning tons of money at all. And the amount that I do earn, I want to spend cultivating, living a happier life, basically. And that doesn't mean spending money on loads of stuff and using loads of resources. And that's not to say that if you are earning money, you're not allowed to do anything anymore, but it's doing things in a very thoughtful way. Like, I'm planning a trip to Japan, which means I'm going to fly in an aeroplane, which uses a big carbon footprint. And that is something I'm doing because I'm privileged enough to be able to do that. But that is the only flight that I am going to have done in 6 years. And I only intend to fly every 5 years or so as an absolute treat. It has to be something really thoughtful, really important. I'm not just going to fly somewhere that I could get the train to. I'm really thoughtful in the things that I do. And I think this life of reprioritizing, living a little bit slower and really thinking about what it is that it's important to you is a really important aspect of sustainable living, and living on a planet in a place where we can be more sustainable, where we're meeting the needs of everyone that's here on the planet now, and we're not taking away the needs of future generations. So in terms of the takeaways from this video, what you can actually go out there, what you can actually go out and do now, I think there are two aspects to this. So there is what you can do in your personal life. You can make decisions not to buy fast fashion. You can choose to buy organic fruit and vegetables. You can minimize the amount of plastic you're using. You can eat more vegan foods. You know, all of the things that I talk about and on this channel in particular are things that you can do to minimize your personal and your individual impact on the planet, the negative impact you're causing. Minimize that as an individual. And the second thing is to actually do your part to make changes happen in the world. So this could be voting for a political party which is most closely aligned with your values. I know a lot of the time this can be difficult because there's not political parties which are exactly aligned with values. So it's a bit of a tricky topic, but making the effort to vote for a party who is more closely aligned with your values is something really important to do. And then taking the time to actually get in contact with your local voted official about things that are important is something really valuable to do. You can hope that they're someone that will actually take on board these comments and listen to their constituents. You could actually join a local political group or a local environmental group. So very many towns around the country and around the world do have these local groups that come together and they do things to educate the public, to talk to people, make changes, get the word out there and help people come to more of an understanding about the crisis we're facing and what we can do about it. So take what you've learned and share that by joining a local group or activist group or a protest. Make your voice heard and help people understand what is going on. And of course you could do something like this. So, you know, start an Instagram, post things on your personal Facebook, talk to your friends and family. You know, I'm not talking about smacking people over the head with stuff that they're not ready to hear, but I think normalising conversations around the changes that are going to need to happen, normalising conversations around the difficult future that we're facing is really important, because we're going to get to a point where things have to change. There's a lot of us that are scared now and we're worried about the future, and more people are going to be impacted and affected. And I think starting those conversations now, helping people to start to change if they're open to that, is really, really valuable thing to do. So my personal philosophy is that our individual happiness, caring for ourselves, replenishing our happiness, caring for our happiness and doing what makes us happy should be the number one thing in our lives, but that should never be at the expense of anyone else. So that's very much, you know, in terms of profit, in terms of our happiness being increased, that we shouldn't be stomping on people. We shouldn't be using too many resources, and we shouldn't be, in my opinion, we shouldn't be harming animals, because that is at the expense of someone else. And I truly believe that we can achieve that safe and just space for humanity. We just need to come together, work hard and make it happen. So I hope you found this video insightful. It's probably quite long, there's a lot to cover, and I really briefly just touched on so many aspects, but I hope it's kind of helped understand what I actually mean by sustainable living a sustainable life, and it's much deeper than taking a reusable bottle instead of buying a plastic one. There's a lot to it, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone. We all need to start taking simple, basic steps, but it is what it is, and I hope you found it useful. So thank you for watching. It would be amazing if you'd like to leave a comment with your thoughts about what I've discussed today down below. I would love to hear from you. You can follow me on Instagram, where I do post lots of ideas about what we can do as individuals to make a difference. And if you could like my video, that would be really cool. Okay, hopefully see you in a future video. So thank you for watching and take care. Bye.